Hi friends, welcome to Coordinate, and today we want to understand what PHP constants are and how we can work with them. In understanding PHP constants, please take note that in simple terms we can just call these constants as simply special type of variables, though they are not variables but they act and work like variables, but unlike the variables, they can't be changed as we progress with the coding and anything related to that. Practically, what I'm talking about is this. If we create a variable, let's say variable n, and then say this variable is equal to hello madam. Definitely, we've created a variable which is n, and the content that will be sent into this variable is hello madam. Hence, if we were to echo out the content in the variable n, definitely we will see hello madam being printed out. But at the same time, this content, the data inside these variables can change. If we were to call the same variable and assign it to a new value, for example, we can say, how are you, sir? Definitely, if we print out the content in the variable n, we don't expect to see hello madam on the screen. Instead of printing out hello madam, we'll see how are you, sir? So how are you, sir? So we've replaced hello madam with how are you, sir? So due to this is why we have what we call PHP constants. I'm sure you can even tell by the word constant, a constant value inside a certain variable. So now to analyze and see how we can work with PHP constants, let's just echo a line break for it to come and print out now the PHP constants on a newly created line. So we can now, of course, understand that the PHP constants, which are of course called PHP constants, are more like special type of variables, though they are not variables. But let's just use the keyword special type of variables, because this will allow you to understand them at a faster rate. So they are more like special type of variables that holds on to data that doesn't change. Even if we were to call the same constant and give it a different value, we'll just see an error because they are constant, they can't change. Now, to work with PHP constants and for we to implement the PHP constants, we need to understand what is called a defined function. The defined function is simply the function that allows us to create and make the PHP constants. So how do we now implement the defined function in PHP for we to create the PHP constants? Well, the defined function simply uses the keyword define, and from there we even implement, of course, the parentheses, and inside the parentheses, at first we need to pass in the first parameter, which will act as the name for the same constant that we want to make. For example, when it comes to the names of the variables, we are using, of course, for example, in our variable we have n as the name. Even when printing out or outputting something on the screen, we were just calling the same variable name. But with PHP constants, if we want to create the name for that constant, we need to pass that name inside the parentheses of the defined function. A function is simply something that has already been made. For example, PHP has already made the defined function. All we need is simply to pass in the values so that it evaluates what is inside. So we can define and make the constants in PHP. And to make the name for the same constant, simply pass in double quotes and write the actual name that you want to refer to when you want to call the same content that are inside that constant as simply a special type of a variable. So we would say, for example, the same constant that I'm making, I will be coding as simply the name of that function, and from there I can add a comma, and simply since I've added a comma, now they are like asking, okay, you've created the constant with the name coding inside the defined function, which is okay and fine to deal with, but what values do you want to insert inside this same constant? what is the actual value that will be held by the coding as the name of that constant function that we are implementing, as to say. So the actual content, I will of course increment a string inside the constant function, hence they should be inside the double quotes, and then from there I can say, okay, the data that should be inside the coding as the name of that constant is simply I love PHP programming. So definitely we've inserted something, we've inserted value or data inside our constant, which is called a coding constant, inside the defined function, because it is the defined function that allows us to create the PHP constants. So can we now print out the actual content that are inside the constant function? Yes, definitely we can do so. And to print out, we've learned so far that we use the echo statement or the print statement, and then we can just say, okay, echo coding as simply the actual name for the same constant. If we were to refresh our page, then definitely if we refresh, we can say that yes, we are even printing out I love programming. Unlike with the variables, this value that is inside the constant, which is called coding, can't be changed. Hence, if you want to create certain text, for example, if you want to insert a number, for example, there are certain numbers that are always constant under this F. Maybe it could be a value added tax to a certain item. That value shouldn't be changed as we proceed with time, because it is constant also in nature. So instead of implementing that inside a variable, it would be way better if it was kept in a constant as simply something that needs to be in the defined function. Doing that simply entails that, okay, this person really understands coding and really knows what we are talking about. Then another thing that you should be aware of when working with PHP constant is simply the fact that they are case sensitive. Hence, even when calling the actual name for the constant that needs to print out or to output the string I love PHP programming, we can't use now the lower cases as simply the actual name for that constant. No, we'll get simply a fatal error, meaning this is undefined. I mean, we doesn't know this constant. What are you calling? So to work with now the constants, simply stick to what is called case sensitive length. Always call it according to the name that you specified. Just like for the variables, a variable, we can't print out a variable of course now with a uppercase N. No, that can't be printed out, because also variables are case sensitive, also PHP constants are case sensitive, and this is simply the basics that we can give when it comes to PHP constants. So if we are now to do a summary, we can say, okay, PHP constants are more like variables, but with them the values inside them, they can't be changed. Unlike variables, values can be changed, and to create PHP constants we use the define function. The define function, the first parameter, of course, which is the name of the constant, should be in between the double quotes, and from there, of course, the value should of course be a second parameter. If we want to call, of course, the same content that is inside the actual constant that we've created, we just need to echo out the actual name for that constant. So please, friends, don't forget to subscribe, and let's progress on our next session. Don't forget you are on CodeNet.